My name is not important, but my failure is. It happened on an ordinary Tuesday. My 5-year-old daughter, her hair still damp from a bath, pointed a small finger at the twilight sky through her bedroom window. "Daddy," she asked, her voice full of that pure, untroubled curiosity that children wield like a weapon, "how many stars are there?" I opened my mouth, and I stopped. I am a reasonably educated man. I know facts. I could have said, "more than you can count, sweetheart." Or I could have reached for the pat, textbook answer I half remembered. Billions and billions. This is not a story about astronomy, not yet. This is a story about the prison of the human mind. Before we can even begin to count the stars, we must understand the terrifying truth. We are neurologically incapable of doing so. We are trying to render a 4K universe on a black and white screen from the 1920s. So, let's begin at the true beginning. Not with telescopes, but with the 3-pound universe inside your skull. And let's see why the quest for the answer is, in many ways, a quest to escape ourselves. Now, I want you to close your eyes. What happens when we finally meet? A number that our minds were never built to contain. What breaks first? I spent a month trying to find out. I didn't look at a single star. Instead, I sat in a dimly lit lab at a university, wires snaking from my scalp, while a cognitive neuroscientist named Dr. Eris Thorne showed me how my own brain betrays me. The cognitive canyon. Think of it like this, Dr. Thorne said, his voice calm as he pointed to my brainwave readings on a monitor. Your visual cortex, your prefrontal cortex, your parietal lobe, they're all in a furious cooperative alliance when you look at 4 dots on a screen. They fire in a beautiful, synchronized chorus 4. They sing together. He changed the image. Now there were 12 dots. Watch, he said. The brainwave pattern changed. It became frantic, less synchronized. It was no longer a chorus, but a committee arguing. The brain was working, counting in clusters, grouping and summing. It was doing math now, he said, and the screen filled with 100 dots. The reading flatlined into noise. Then, strangely, it settled into a pattern, almost identical to the one for 12. See that horn, said. It gave up. It's not perceiving 100, it's perceiving a lot, and using the same tired neural pathway it used for 12. Your brain has essentially thrown its hands up and filed it under miscellaneous. Many. He turned to me, his glasses reflecting the cool light of the monitors. You are asking your brain to do something it has no evolutionary hardware for. You are asking a fish to comprehend mountaineering. The number of stars in the universe isn't just a larger number than you're used to. It exists in a different category of being from anything your neurology can process. To even approach it, you must abandon intuition entirely. You must trust only the coldest, most abstract mathematics. And that he paused, that creates a profound psychological dissonance. A rift between what you know and what you are. I left the lab that day feeling unmoored. The question, how many stars, had transformed. It was no longer an external query, the cosmos. It was an internal probe, testing the limits of my own consciousness, the seduction of analogy and its betrayal. Faced with this cognitive canyon, we humans do what we always do. We build bridges of analogy. We say things like, the stars are as numerous as the grains of sand on all the beaches on Earth. It's a beautiful phrase. It's also a trap. I went to a beach, Carmel, California. I scooped up a handful of coarse, golden sand. I let it sift through my fingers. I tried, genuinely tried, to count the grains in my palm. A few hundred in before my focus shattered. My eyes glazed over. The individual grains lost meaning and became a texture, a substance. Scientists have actually done the math. They estimate there are roughly 7.5 quintillion grains of sand on all our planets, beaches, and deserts. It is a number that already defies my comprehension, and yet, I will later learn, this unimaginable number is insignificant compared to the number of stars. The analogy isn't a bridge, it's a plank over the Mariana Trench. It gives of crossing, but the chasm below is still bottomless. Every analogy we invent, grains of sand, drops in the ocean, blades of grass, fails catastrophically when applied to the cosmic scale. They are comforting lies we tell ourselves to keep the vertigo at bay. They are the mental equivalent of a child closing their eyes to make the monster go away. The architecture of scale, million, billion, trillions, to have any hope. We must build a new foundation. We must train ourselves, like ascetics, in a monastery of scale, to feel the differences between magnitudes. Let's start with 3 words we throw around carelessly. Million, billion, trillion. I want you to feel them, not just know them. A million seconds ago was about 11.5 days in the past. You could, in theory, experience a million seconds. You could take a 2-week vacation and, if you were painfully bored, count each second. It's a marathon, but it's human. It exists within the frame of a life. A billion seconds ago. That was 1992. A billion seconds is 32 years. If you started counting from the moment of your birth, 1 per second, you'd now be in your early 30s, and you would have done nothing else. Your entire conscious life to date would be consumed by the act of counting to 1 billion. The number has expanded from a time scale of days to a time scale of a generation. Now hold on to something. A trillion seconds, trillion seconds ago, was 31,700 years before the present. Let that settle. A trillion seconds ago, the last ice age was in full swing. Woolly mammoths roamed where Paris and New York now stand. Homo sapiens were hunter-gatherers, living in small bands, creating the first cave art in Lascaux. Every recorded human history, every pyramid, every empire, every revolution, every phone you've ever owned, all of it has occurred in a fraction of the time it would take to count to 1 trillion. The difference between a million and a billion is a factor of 1,000. The difference between a billion and a trillion is another factor of 1,000. These are not just bigger numbers. They are different orders of existence. A trillion is to a billion what a billion is to a million, an unimaginable leap. And here is the cold water in your face. When we talk about the number of stars in our galaxy alone, we leave the realm of trillions behind. We are already in another stratosphere. And when we talk about the universe, we will need to invent new words. The first taste of the abyss, armed with this shaky new understanding of scale, I made my first tentative foray into the actual astronomy. I called a friend, an astrophysicist named Lena. I asked her, Lena, just our galaxy, the Milky Way, how many stars? There was a long pause on the line. I could almost hear her choosing her words, trying to find a translation from mathematics to human experience. The best estimate, she said carefully, is between 150 and 250 billion. Let's say 200 billion. It's a good round number. 200 billion, I repeated. Do you want to feel it? She asked, a hint of challenge in her voice. Yes, count with me. 1 star per second. 1, 2, 3, I began, like an idiot. No, she interrupted. Don't count, just feel the time, at 1 per second. It would take you over 6,000 years to count the stars in the Milky Way. You would need to have started counting around 4000 BC, before the invention of the wheel, before Stonehenge, before the first pharaoh ruled Egypt. You would have counted through the rise and fall of every empire you've ever read about. You would have counted through the Dark Ages, the Renaissance, the Industrial Revolution, counting every single second, and you'd still have centuries to go today. The phone felt heavy in my hand. My office, with its books and desk lamp, suddenly seemed like a diorama, a tiny, fragile set. 200 billion was no longer a number. It was a tidal wave of time. It was a weight. And Lena, I asked, my voice quieter than I intended, how many of those can we see on the darkest night? With the naked eye, she said. From a perfect spot, maybe 4,000, maybe 5,000, if your eyes are really good and you're patient. Did the crude math. 200 billion divided by 4,000. So for every single star we can see, I said, the realization dawning with a sickening thrill. There are 50 million stars we cannot see. Yes, Lena said softly. The night sky is a hoax. It's a tiny, glowing portal. It's not a window showing us the universe. It's a peephole, and we've been mistaking it for a panorama. I hung up the phone. I walked to the window. It was midday. The sky was a pale, blank blue. But in my mind, it was night, and I was staring at that peephole. Every pinprick of light, I imagined now, had a shadow, a legacy of 50 million invisible siblings. The sky no longer felt like a dome above me. It felt like a skin, and behind it, something was pressing in, something vast and dark and teeming with infinite fire. This was just our galaxy. One galaxy. Lena had casually mentioned that 200 billion figure as a starting point, a local census. The true question, the universal question, was still out there, lurking. I had felt the first real tremor of the seismic scale to come. My brain, trained for savannas and social circles, had just had its first system error. The comfortable, middle-scale world of my daily life of traffic jams and grocery lists and monthly bills began to feel like a dream, a thin veneer over a reality of such monstrous size that it rendered my concerns not just small, but absurd. This was the beginning of the psychological unraveling. This was the hook, not just in my mind, but in my gut. I thought of my daughter's question. How many stars are there? We had taken our first step. We had counted, in a way, our own backyard. And the number was already so large it had altered my perception of history, of time, of my own place in my own neighborhood. But the Milky Way is an island, and in 1924 we discovered we are not alone in the ocean. The real terror, the true magnificent, brain-breaking scope of the question was about to be revealed. We had just finished counting the trees in our local forest. We were about to discover that our forest was one of trillions, lost in a continent that stretched forever. And so, the suspense deepens, shifting from the cognitive to the cosmic. We've felt the limits of our mind. We've felt the weight of 200 billion. But that weight is just a single snowflake on the tip of the iceberg. If the number for our own galaxy is a tidal wave that washes away millennia, what kind of cataclysm awaits when we try to measure the ocean? The universe's first and most enduring lie is written in light. It's a forgery painted across the dome of night, a masterpiece of misdirection that every human who has ever drawn breath has believed. I believed it. You believe it, right? Now, even if you know better intellectually, because the lie isn't in our knowledge, it's etched into our primal perception. The lie is this: asterisk, asterisk, when you look up at the stars, you are seeing the universe. It's a comforting thought, isn't it? That tapestry of diamond dust, the familiar constellations, the occasional streaking meteor, it feels like a direct connection to the infinite. It feels like truth. It is, in fact, a prison wall disguised as a window. After my phone call with Lena, after the 200 billion star tremor shook my worldview, I became obsessed with this lie. I needed to see the fraud for myself, to feel the moment the illusion shattered. So I went to the one place in my part of the world where the lie is told most perfectly. A remote patch of high desert, miles from the nearest glow of human civilization. I went there not as a stargazer, but as an investigator of a cosmic crime scene. My tools were not a telescope, not yet, but a folding chair, a heavy coat, and a mind primed for betrayal. This chapter is about that betrayal. It's about the gaping chasm between what we see and what is. It's about understanding that our entire historical relationship with the cosmos, our myths, our gods, our science, was built on a foundation of profound ignorance, forced upon us by the biological limits of our eyes. The suspense here is not about discovering something new out there. The suspense is about discovering that asterisk, asterisk, the out there we've always trusted is a carefully stage-managed illusion. Asterisk, asterisk, what happens when you pull back the curtain? The desert cold was a physical shock, a crisp, thin air that felt like inhaling glass. The sun had vanished hours before, leaving behind a blackness so complete it had texture, a velvet void. I tilted my head back, and there it was, the lie in all its breathtaking glory. The Milky Way. It was not the faint, anemic smear I glimpsed from my suburban driveway. This was a torrent, a raging, silent river of ghostly light splitting the sky in two, so bright it cast faint, conflicting shadows on the sand. It looked solid enough to walk across, a bridge of lost souls. Constellations I knew were drowned in a froth of countless unnamed stars. For a long, suspended moment, the intellectual understanding, 200 billion, 50 million to 1, evaporated. My animal brain took over, pure and undiluted, washed through me. This is it. The whole magnificent show. And then, like a slow-acting poison, the knowledge seeped back in. It didn't diminish the beauty, it weaponized it. That river of light wasn't a river, it was the edge-on view of a disk. My gaze was skimming the surface of a structure 100,000 light-years across, and every single pinpoint of light I could see, every star that allowed me to trace the shapes of Orion and Scorpius and the Southern Cross, was a local phenomenon. They were all, every last one, residents of my own galactic city. The brightest, Sirius, was a mere 8.6 light-years away, a neighbor, hanging over the backyard fence. The faintest visible to my naked eye. Maybe 4,000 light-years, distant, still well within the city limits. I was not looking at the universe. I was looking at my street. A profound loneliness, colder than the desert air, enveloped me. The sky, which had felt so vast a moment before, now felt claustrophobic, like the painted ceiling of a tomb. The lie was no longer an abstract concept. It was a visceral, sensory reality. The universe had played a trick on my species for 300,000 years. We had written epics, aligned our pyramids, navigated oceans, and founded philosophies based on this myopic view. We had been like ants in a single garden, convinced the flower bed was the entire world. The hook of this chapter is that moment of inverted claustrophobia, the terrifying realization that the boundless sky is a cage. The suspense lies in tracing the history of this deception, and the moment a single, curious man first pierced the veil. What did he feel when he realized that everything humanity knew was wrong? And what does that mean for the trust we place in our own senses right now? The prison of the pupil, a biological conspiracy to understand the depth of the deception. We must start with the flawed instrument, the human eye. My quest led me from the desert to a darkened ophthalmology lab, where a patient researcher named Dr. Ilara Vance showed me why we are all fundamentally blind. It's a miracle of evolution for what it was designed for, she said, pointing to a detailed diagram of the retina. Seeing the leopard in the dappled shade, recognizing fruit amongst leaves, reading subtle facial expressions for threat or alliance. It is not, she emphasized, designed for astronomy. She broke down the conspiracy. The aperture problem, our pupil, at its widest in perfect darkness, is about 7 to 8 millimeters across. It's a pinhole camera. A modern amateur telescope has a lens or mirror measured in inches. The Hubble Space Telescope's mirror is 2.4 meters across. The difference in light-gathering power is the difference between catching raindrops in a thimble and channeling a storm into a reservoir. Our eyes are physically incapable of collecting enough photons from faint, distant objects. The rod cell betrayal we see in the dark with rod cells. They are exquisitely sensitive but colorblind and clustered away from our central vision. To see a faint star, you must literally look away from it using averted vision. Our own retinal architecture forces us to view the cosmos peripherally, indirectly. The signal-tune noise lie, even the stars we do see are a filtered signal. Interstellar dust, fine, floating graphite and silicate grains, scatters and absorbs starlight, especially blue light. It acts like a cosmic fog, reddening and dimming distant suns. The night sky we see is not a true map. It's a blurred, censored version. The brightest stars are not necessarily the biggest or most powerful. They are often just the closest, or the ones peeking through a clear lane in the fog. The professional stargazers cursed aground myself. I sought out someone who lived with this truth every night, an observational astronomer named Ben, who worked at a remote mountaintop observatory as a telescope operator. I found him at dawn, bleary-eyed, after a long night of guiding a $1 million instrument to collect photons from a galaxy 1 billion light-years away, over bitter coffee in a cramped control room, surrounded by flickering monitors showing graphs of light intensity. I asked him the naive question, Does the beauty ever fade? Do you get used to it? Used to it? No. You don't get used to a funhouse mirror that shows you how small you are every single night. He sipped his coffee. The curse of this job is that it ruins the night sky forever. I can't just look up anymore. When I see Orion, I don't see a hunter. I see Betelgeuse, a bloated red supergiant about to go supernova any millennium now. I see the Orion Nebula, a stellar nursery 1,300 light-years away. And I immediately think of the infrared data we got last week, showing protoplanetary disks inside it. The sky stops being a picture and becomes a schematic, a blueprint of processes so vast they make you feel like a ghost. He pointed to a monitor showing a jagged, repeating line. That's the light curve of a variable star in a dwarf galaxy 150,000 light-years away. Each blip is a photon that has been traveling since the time our species was just beginning to spread out of Africa. My job is to shepherd those photons, maybe 24 an hour, into a detector. I spend my nights tending to ghosts. So what's the point? I asked, genuinely wondering if it just makes you feel insignificant. Ben turned his bloodshot eyes to me. The point is that the lie is comfortable, the truth is alive. Feeling insignificant is the correct asterisk feeling. It's the feeling of being in the presence of something real. The beauty isn't in the pretty pictures. It's in the sheer, violent, outrageous fact of it all. It's like finally hearing the ocean after only ever seeing pictures of waves. The sound is terrifying. It'll drown you, but at least it's real. His words stayed with me. The journey was stripping away comfort and replacing it with reality, no matter how harsh. We had dismantled the illusion of the night sky. We had learned it was a local neighborhood bulletin board, not a window to the cosmos. We had felt the first shocking depth revealed by a simple lens, but a critical piece was still missing. We had broken the 2D sphere and revealed a 3D forest of stars. But was the forest alone? Or was it just one copse in an endless wilderness? The Milky Way was our island universe. But was it an island in an ocean? Or was the ocean itself a myth? The stage was now set for the greatest shock of all. A shock that would come not from pointing a telescope at a dark patch, but at a faint, fuzzy nebula that generations of astronomers had catalogued as a mere cloud within our Milky Way. The suspense was about to escalate from the scale of galaxies to the scale of the universe itself. We had just learned we were prisoners in a vast, star-filled chamber. The next question would be, is there anything outside the chamber? If the Milky Way is our entire world, and its 100 billion stars are merely the ones too dim for our eyes to see, what fresh layer of madness awaits when we discover that our world is not alone, that it is just one of countless, floating in a void so large it makes our galaxy look like a speck of dust?